Welcome. Had this idea. So, yesterday I was talking about the concept of just like, let's just say there's a sphere, and then that sphere has layers. That there's like a solid layer of a crust, and then some sort of separator layer, and then a liquid layer of the mantle where the separator is the moho, the boundary between the mantle and the crust. And so I just kind of said, well, what would happen if it were to be the there were to be a flow at that boundary from a puncture point in all directions, with the added aspect that there's a physical rotation of the sphere surface as the time passes, and then essentially talking about the concept that this stream branches off, that goes straight opposite the rest, but then anything that goes off of opposite bends back with the rest and is essentially part of the rest, leading to a divide where there's a strong current. So this concept, this morning I decided to map it. It's a little confusing now that I've already done it, and it occurred to me it would be nice had I done this sequentially in layers, maybe, but too late now. But I did start by doing just basically green. So green is, here's a mantle puncture hole. Here's a green coming out in all directions, kind of attempt, because essentially what the sphere was doesn't include the oceans. So this sphere had no ocean, like crust. This crust didn't exist on this sphere until the currents filled the entirety of the sphere, and then they continued to flow to a point where the sphere then grew to a new radius. So initially, its directions, it seems, are not. So this is based on what I'm doing here, is in part based on. So it's kind of maybe cheating, and it would be beneficial if this could be just modeled. But so essentially, they're this is not quite the same as what I have here, where there's this green that goes down this way, but there's notably a divide in the current that's going this way and down here. That's not really captured in this because I didn't quite do it right, of course. So essentially this region, I believe, there's three, four currents kind of thing, if you will, that span out this way but get divided by this current coming this way, and then opening a region here that basically causes a portion of the current generally going this way to also go down this way without so much filling this space. So that's going on to a degree that's not really captured in this, but maybe it would be if it was modeled. I really think that this is my thoughts. It's very difficult for me to do because I don't even know where to begin. To model this. But I believe if we said, hypothetically, let's say there's a uniform sphere where a current flows underneath the crust in a manner where it flows out at the sphere has a certain radius. Like all the variables are like input, and then the outcome radius is used as like a hinge to how much current it would take to do that. And then essentially like putting in more and more like outflow currents, like it just a tiny bit, it would only go out to like a tiny radius, but with a sufficient current it fills the entire earth. And like adding in the rotation of the sphere, accounting for that aspect, that the sphere as this is occurring is rotating, so that it's like causing curvature in the flows to lead to a structure more like this, where there's like a protruding current and then like a fanning current. So this is kind of the fanning current here, inclusive of this, that maybe more so is like a southward propagating current that maybe had like a good balance there. Okay, so the green first, but then the orange. I'm not so sure about this. Like maybe over time it occurred, like in terms of the sequence and the degrees and so on. Like it appears like it did generally fan out to a certain radius or a certain distance away in here. At least that's where it's stabilized. Like it might have fanned out further, like up further initially, and then when this current came up this way, this current goes this way over here, wraps around the pole that it creates, and then basically runs into resistance of this block by wrapping around it. So like this current coming this way is producing this like resistance zone that then when the current runs from over here into it, it basically deflects this way off of the resistance that's being produced over here, probably flowing in part through it at this region, but then going up through here and cutting across this way. And it may have actually gone out to like the more uniform boundary here, like out to here and then across here initially, before this region filled with more mass that like got pushed up further to block off this portion of the channel, as like the current just was no longer able to like hold the boundary and it got pushed this way, but it was able to hold this boundary, and so it then flowed this way just through here. Just this way, just across here, but then it hit this resistance where it flowed over here, down here, and basically is when the Himalayas are formed by this like narrowing of the channel, which then causes probably a increased velocity in the current because of the narrowing of the channel, even though there's less overall current because it's being overwhelmed at that point and not able to hold the boundary. It's still like a focus current that ends up coming out at that point. So that current goes up this way, goes around above North America, above Greenland, and then cuts in around that like system there, that node, that terminal, and then it's basically it's partly goes this way and partly goes across. Like some of it hugs this boundary really like along the boundary and is caused to go generally across the current then. So it wraps up this way around and around to then go down along here. Down along here, where it then goes down and passes this current, this wide current. Then it runs across that current and kind of vibrates at this point. Which also appears, I believe, like this current coming this way also has a more focused beam that still goes more directly out. That generally ends up at some point focusing towards Yellowstone in a sort of like balance between the two sides, like this current coming out this way. Initially, this current, the two currents, I believe, form a sort of like essentially a point where they divert in like different directions. Some of the current goes up this way, some goes up this way, and then down and down. And so there's like a pinching point, which I believe is where Hawaii was forming, was between the pinches of the most focused currents, like exactly these lines where they're really is like a which kind of more zoomed in would look like this and like this and like this and like this, where then there's a pole basically like a very a top, if you will, that is spinning, not like literally along this axis. It's spinning along this axis so that it's rotating like this. And then so forms Hawaii. So forms Hawaii. Which then continues to layer shells perhaps until it reaches like a point that it physically is able to separate the currents, where they are forced to, maybe I should just start a new one. So here real quick, here, 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 maybe I can just Since I drew it, actually, let's copy it. No need to, like, rush draw it. This is better than anything. I would draw that quickly. Okay. Then, like, the currents get physically separated, so they're more like this. I don't know why I do that. Okay, and then Hawaii, then slips out of it, I guess, like up this way. I'm thinking up, like it really lodges into a crevice in a corner, but like out of balance, so that then these currents end up doing like this. Hawaii as a sphere with axis of rotation that was that way. So maybe it even as it rolls, it rolled like generally like that. Possibly. And then at this point, these currents have this like system right there that then leads to separation, where the currents pretty much begin to just like flow further away. I'm not sure, honestly. This actually, maybe this is happening, right? What I'm showing here, maybe this is happening. Because essentially, the issue with that, as absurd as people may think it to be, like to even be considering these things, the issue with that is there's this current is for sure the current I'm drawing, like it's basically coming across from the mantle puncture hole and then out into the Pacific here, where it then initially is just colliding with the other current, but then it begins to produce space. This current is colliding with the current here, but then their collision point like vibrates outward. And somehow I feel like Hawaii is forming. Like, is it possible where they're colliding at the tip of Japan is somehow up here initially? Really doesn't. Or were they... It may be that this is a secondary collision, like a primary collision was more this way. Because that looks like another... Or update here, basically. Like maybe this was more exact. It's hard to say without an actual Earth that has like the right shape. It would be so cool to have this map somehow, just with like the expanding Earth accounted for, where the ocean's just removed across, and I could just scroll back in time. Maybe it started here and went up this way and reached here where... Like if essentially the current's coming across this way, running into the other current here, pretty much here, at the oldest part, which was actually in here, not up here, so more so over here, I think. I actually used the map for that. So like over here is the oldest. So it's probably colliding here initially, and then sliding the collision point, maybe sliding upward as the Earth expands so that it moves this way, with Hawaii still forming. Oh, oops. If this is occurring, of course. Everything, of course, based on the if this is actually occurring. This is just looking into it. Can't know if we don't look into it. Or maybe it like goes out of balance here is what's going on. Like the current. One of them goes up. This one goes up and down. Where this one goes up on this side and down on this side. Maybe? I don't know. Wait, this one goes up because it's this current going up to here and down. Maybe it splits, like this current running into this current divides it, and then it remerges this current generally. So this is just one current like going across here, and then it kind of divides it again and remerges over here. With it more like there being a current going this way at this point. From down here up. Sorry. I know I need to like maybe turn on some mouse. What do we got here? Mouse and cursor size. Additional mouse options. Oops. It's huge on my screen when I adjust that, but it doesn't seem to do it on my recording software. Maybe mouse. Oh my god. Okay. So, I guess I'll be back. That's pretty much, maybe I'll finish here. Did I go through everything? So those current, let me just quickly go through these currents. These currents expand outward to here, run across here, run into there. That's how I got through there. And then this one goes over this way, comes down this way. And then it passes this current, like it passes the bulk of it and basically finds like a channel between its like fingers that are kind of propagating as finger type structures and flows between it and divides it pretty much. And then essentially I figured like this is probably what's happening. It's hard to tell in here what's happening exactly because it's missing some data. It looks generally more like it's like this. So this, what I drew here may not be quite accurate there. There's seems to be a flow going this way and then seemingly combines here. Probably some degree goes back further, but essentially is largely deflected back this way. Maybe like this is where it ends up being deflected back really over here at the most distant point, and then this current ends basically actually comes in more precisely here at a later point. At least it seems like initially it's just kind of flowing everywhere, so it doesn't preferentially choose like right there exactly until later on, because the East African Rift Zone wasn't formed until later on. Probably preferentially chooses there once the Earth started to expand, which then started to form like channels that flows were focused to that then channeled through specific locations at the boundaries of the continents that were forming. And then this bottom flowing, southward flowing current basically then goes through South America, connected here. Basically, this amount of it. So like generally here, and then from there into Antarctica, and then up into Australia, where it then meets this current that's coming across this way, and runs into Australia. And there's probably some amount of current also involved generally that way, or even like this way specifically, because Australia's up there initially, but I believe it begins to open up and kind of move over to like this kind of way, in a way where it doesn't necessarily have this current that involved, and it's more maybe more so these currents. And then there's this current branching off this way. So Australia's generally has like this divide here. These currents here are going here, and then they're branching up this way. So it's probably here, like right there, where those currents meet. Right here, where Hawaii is being pinched with from over here initially, which is actually maybe more so up here initially, like at this boundary, right at Japan again. So that there then is initially up there colliding, and then it started to like create space outward there. Over here though, because this is late, like the opening of the islands off of the coast of Asia here didn't happen until later, once the Earth started to expand. Then a current was caused to flow down between them, down this way. Here's Japan. I know it's hard to see. And Korea through there and divide them through this channel, through this channel, through this channel to the Indonesian archipelago, basically pushing this landmass down, disconnecting it from this segment, breaking the bond. Which it left behind maybe like an electron that it had, like, some kind of thing that it was using in exchange for balance, like the polygonal systems being equivalent to atoms bonded in a molecule. Where their bond breaking like led to like this arc sticking out, because that's almost like an electron unbounded, maybe unbonded. Unbounded. Pardon my inability to use like precise technical details adequately in instances. It's still what I'm saying. It still like applies Michael Faraday style. Okay. Then this current flows down and basically creates a boundary with the up here. So maybe it was more up here initially, but then this current went around and around and wrapped down here and shoved the boundary down a bit and created a lower boundary, which then it deflects off. I'm not quite sure. I guess this current maybe goes more like this even also. Like some, or like kind of down to here, which then this current kind of runs into this, which leads to a current going this way. Because essentially this is going this way. Something's going this way to flow up here. Somehow this current flowing up this way is occurring. And it seems to be because this and this are colliding at that point, which then lead to a side current flowing this way, and probably also this way, like encouraging the Atlantic to open this way by this current flowing back, which really is colliding at Flemish Cap, and then essentially producing a boundary, which then this flows around and also seemingly like reaches into. And then this, I believe, also has a degree of current that like runs along, creating a boundary here, and just like keeps fighting the resistance to produce a boundary. Because that's the shape it seems to be here. It seems to have an inlet over here and to have like built up material over here, so it probably flowed in here and just met resistance along the way, building a boundary, and then just like had enough of a current to fill the space. But then it kind of like filled it enough to have enough back pressure to not have a current flow in there, but that's how it's stabilized as. So it's probably of that nature going on. So let's just draw that real quick. And then over here it's colliding, but a bit at an angle, which is kind of like producing like waves out this way. So I guess if this current's here, right here, basically dividing there, so like this current from over here must be generally coming in like this way. So right around there. Unrelated to this chunk, but regarding Australia because they move relative to one another. Then this spiral just like really separates the region and shapes it, but then this current ends up producing a vortex along the coast of South America as it separates. Like initially it's going in here, but then as it separates, flowing this way, this here is actually here, flowing from this current, bending off this way, and also this current, like the combination of the two that actually end up going this way. Specifically, because Papua New Guinea is right here, pretty much. So it flows along here, and then from here to into here, but then it separates and creates this region, which is like forming along, like initially here, but then like moving down here, so the current's rotating along the coastline, and then like creating a shape of the coastline down here, and just producing this region, and then separating like with newly, like it flows in behind it and pushes space so that the shape that was just created is severed, which is then here, I guess, and then the boundary just flows in, like the current just keeps flowing, but then it seems to go down this way. These currents, maybe two currents, maybe that's why there's this here and this here, like they're re-merging this current and this current. And then maybe the Hawaiian, the current coming over from this way, yeah, over from this way at that point, almost like over there. Maybe it comes in like at that kind of angle enough to create like a separation there. I don't know. Or this is actually this is probably just created as they separate here, as this moves away. This region is created, that's right. And then there's a current generally going down here that runs into this current still, that's then like divided off this way, and then this current's this way, which then was going through here and ends up breaking this boundary, severing the continents there, flowing up this way, where it then meets the current that was going this way over here. And this, like, resistance, and they're generally propagated that way and that way in there to really shape this. Okay, that's enough for now. I'll see y'all soon.